He didn't live a complex life, it was a simple life. And I understand why he accepted Ahmadiyyat.
What he did do was give a kind word, a good piece of advice, and pray for us.
He was not a man of this world. He was totally cut off from this world.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, and welcome to another episode of Servants of Allah. In this series, we've been listening to some truly astonishing accounts from some of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community's most dedicated servants, individuals who have endured great sacrifice and rendered immense service for the propagation of Islam and Ahmadiyyat. Inshallah, in today's program, we will be looking at yet another dedicated and loyal servant of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, Maulana Bashir Ahmad Sahib. Joining us in the studio for our discussion is his son, respected Nisar Ahmad Sahib. Nisar Sahib, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. And Jazakallah for coming and joining us. Sahib, your father was an outstanding individual and is very well known in the Jamaat's history, particularly here in the UK, for he had a very long interaction and served for many years. But before we look at the various aspects of his life and his great character, if I could ask you to kindly give a little brief insight into his background and the blessed journey of accepting Islam and Ahmadiyyat.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. From the onset, I think I should start off by saying that he was actually an Englishman, not a Scotsman. Many people do get mistaken for that for obvious reasons, because his children have acquired a Scottish accent, but he was very, very much an Englishman. He was born James Brian Orchard, and then after his conversion he became Bashir Ahmad Orchard. War is something that we would tend to want to avoid rather than being involved with for obvious reasons. But ironically, if it wasn't for the war, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. And he did actually saw and was present at two famous war landmarks during the Second World War. The first one was Dunkirk in France, and the second one was the Burma front. And if it wasn't for that journey, then he wouldn't have started his own spiritual journey. And while he was in Burma, at the Burma front, there he met one of his colleagues who was an Ahmadi Muslim. His name was Abdul Rahman Delvi Saab, and he actually invited him to visit Qadian. And to my father, Qadian was just any other place. But out of courtesy, he said yes, he will come when his next break arrives. And nearing that next break, Rahman Delvi Saab reminded him, but my father, fighting on the front line, he wanted a break, literally a break. And he said to him, "I'm sorry, I won't come," after promising that he would go. But he saw the disappointment in his face, and because of the disappointment on his countenance, he said, "Okay, I will come." Okay. So he had a 2-week break, and out of those 2 weeks, 10 days was just involved in travelling to and fro from Qadian. And you still have to remember the backdrop. We're in the Second World War here. And for those few days that he was in Qadian, he did meet some prominent members of the Jamaat, Mufti Sadiq Saab, who I believe was the first missionary in America, and Khalifatul Thani Raziallahu Anhu. And for those first few days, he met those prominent members, and then he returned basically to fight again. And at the end of the war in 46, he returned to Qadian, and he basically gave his life to the Jamaat, and as they say, the rest is history.
Amazing. Sahib, you've just mentioned the fact that he accepted Ahmadiyyat, and I believe that was soon after that he also not only accepted Ahmadiyyat, but devoted his life for the service of Islam and Ahmadiyyat. And no doubt that must have brought an enormous change in his lifestyle. You mentioned the fact that he was an Englishman, and now he was a missionary serving Islam and Ahmadiyyat. There must have been a change in his lifestyle, standard of living. So we spoke to Bashir Rafiq Saab, who is the former Imam of the London Mosque, and he actually shed some light on this particular aspect, which we can actually play for you right now.
The second thing that comes to my mind is his austerity. He was not a man of this world. He was totally cut off from this world. I once remember I went to Glasgow, and as I was the minister in charge, I stayed outside, but one day, every day I would go to the mission house to check various things and talk about various things with Arshad Sahib. One day, his wife came to the door. Arshad Sahib was not there at that time. He had gone out for something. And she said, she wanted to talk to me about something. I said, yes. So she said that, Imam Sahib, if you come to my bedroom, you will see that my bed is so old that every night that we sleep, we are frightened that it might just collapse. And once or twice it had already happened. Then she said, there are 2 or 3 chairs, some are broken. And so I said, well, why doesn't Arshad Sahib write to me? Because I can allow him any budget that he wants for this purpose. But I've never received any report from him that I need some money for these furnishing. And so she said, well, you know him. He doesn't care about these things. His link is up, and he will never talk to you about it. So I was very much moved, when I saw this, that a man, an Englishman, who was brought up in Torquay and Bristol, and those areas, spending a life so austere, like Mr. Arshad. When I came back, I didn't talk to Arshad Sahib about it because his wife said, please don't mention to him that I talked to you. So when I came back, I wrote a check. I got Majlis Amla's approval, and I don't know how much it was, but I wrote a check and sent it to him. And I said, this is nothing to do with your budget that we give you. This is only for the furnishing of your house. You must have new beds, new chairs. By the grace of God, we have money, so there is no problem. Mr. Arshad called me, he phoned me, and he said, I wouldn't like to accept this. I'm all right, I'm happy. So why should I go and buy new things? Now, I couldn't tell him, that I had a discussion with his wife about it. So I said to him, look here, these are my orders. I'm Mr. in charge. You have to obey. So you go and buy these things and make your life easier for your wife and your children. It's not only you. And number 2, I said, Mr. Arshad, we are not now, by the grace of God, we have our own income. Own income means chanda and everything, and we have much. So he accepted this money with a lot of reluctance. This shows, that a man like Mr. Arshad, who was in the British Army, a lieutenant, now, sort of leading a life of poverty and austerity.
I must say, I do ask myself, why he did choose this life of austerity as well, because he did come from a middle-class, well-to-do family. And as I said earlier, at the age of 26, in 1946, at the end of the Second War, he returned to Qadian and basically gave his life, okay? And also what's more amazing about it is that he never actually spent 7 years at Jamia. Seemingly he was fast-tracked. He wanted to get onto the field. He wanted to do field work immediately. And that's what he immediately took up. He was going door to door, knocking, doing this tabligh and preaching. But probably what also amazes me as well, in that not only did he do preaching, but he had to look after his own flock as well. And predominantly our members are of Pakistani subcontinent origin. And he was an Englishman who had to look after them. So he had to probably still overcome language barriers and cultural barriers, but nevertheless, for 50 plus years that he devoted his life, he steadfastly, kept on track in order to fulfill his mission, the mission why he accepted Ahmadiyyat. And that was to basically to transfer the goodness that he saw in the face of Khalif al-Thani Raziyallahu anhu when he met him in Qadian for the first time, onto the people of the Jamaat in order to continue that stream of piety and nakiness.
It's rather difficult to do justice to someone's whole life in just one single program. It's very difficult to encapsulate all aspects of his character. But I would like to ask you, Ochita was a man of many great qualities. But what were some of those qualities that you would like to mention, that the more notable ones that he had, and how they manifested in his life?
Well, I'm going to mention a few random ones, okay, because there's so many, okay. But I recall that when Hazrat Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, when she was asked to describe the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, she replied, one should go and read the Quran, and then you will know the Prophet's life. In a way, I say that if you read his book that he wrote, Life Supreme, or Azim Zindagi, then you will know the qualities of Bashir Ahmad Orchard. His main goal was the acquisition of virtue, and such virtues like politeness, caring, courteousness, meekness and so forth, all good qualities, okay? I mean, these qualities to him were like low-hanging fruit from a tree ready to be plucked, they were free in life, they were there, he took advantage of it in order for one main goal, and that was to become a better, righteous person. So as I said, there's so many qualities, but those qualities can be summed up in his book. And also that particular book, I believe to this day, even though he never told me, but I honestly think it was a summary of his own favourite book. And his favourite book was the Philosophy of the Teachings of Islam, which he read more than 50 times. And I believe his Life Supreme is a summary of that. It's written in lay terms in which anyone and everyone can understand and relate to very easily.
You mentioned the fact that there's a number of qualities that he possessed. We had the opportunity to speak to various members of your family and friends who had a strong relationship with your father. We spoke to your older brother, and we posed the same question to him regarding the qualities of your father, and he mentioned something very interesting that we can play for you here.
When he first became an Ahmadi, and then very soon he decided to dedicate his life, and the Imam of London sent a letter to Khalif Sultani to that this is what my father wanted to do, and should we accept? And Hazur sent a letter back saying, well, accept his waqf, but give him slightly more allowance than the normal missionaries and waqf, because he's from UK and their life standard of living is slightly higher. But then my father found that out, and he wrote back saying, no, I want the same amount of allowance that everybody else gets. So it started right from the beginning.
Apart from simpleness, which was probably his best quality, he also had the quality of punctuality, which he had since he was very young because of the environment he was brought up in, very strict English upbringing. Plus his army upbringing as well, it really made him strict when it came to punctuality. So there was a story that Ibrahim Ibn Sa'id was telling me, who's the Amir Island, Murabi in Charge Island, and he told me that, I've heard this story quite a few times, that my grandfather once attended an event, maybe Hazrat Masih Maud al-Islam or Hazrat Muslim al-Dayh, and he had a speech to say. So he was there on time, of course, as always, but there was no one in the hall. But even though there was no one there, he started his speech on time, and people were arriving late, obviously, and they were probably wondering what's happening here. There's no one sitting down, but he's saying his speech. But then I asked Ibrahim ibn Sa'id, what did he tell you about this? Like, what was the full story? And Ibrahim ibn Sa'id said that my grandfather told him that even though there was no one there, he could still see the angel sitting there listening to him. So I think punctuality is definitely something that we must all have. It's a very important thing in life.
Well, I have a couple of my own stories about punctuality and equality. It may not sound actually equal when I do tell you the story, but in terms of punctuality, it's a very, very similar story to what my nephew had just said there. And this time it was in Glasgow. A very, very similar thing happened, which just showed how consistent he was. And again, there was a meeting, maybe some general meeting at 8 o'clock in the evening in Glasgow. No one came on time anyway. And again, he was in the room. He started with Tilawat in an empty room, and I was standing. I was just a young boy at the time, and my mother was saying, go inside, go inside. So at least there's some company, but I was just too shy to go inside. But that was basically him. He would start on time, so he would finish on time, simply because he didn't respect time only, he respected other people's time as well. In terms of equality, just like how my elder brother mentioned that he wanted to be treated the same, but for some reason, on his headstone, it actually says at the very bottom, Wasiyyat 1/3. Normally people's Wasiyyat is 1/10. However he managed to get that privilege to pay, because people have to remember, to be a Musi, it's a privilege to be, but to give even more in the way of Allah is even a greater privilege. And with his, let's say, salary, with whatever he received, which probably wasn't much for a missionary, but nevertheless he still paid 1/3, and he still managed to save from his salary if one thinks about it. So as I said, punctuality, equality was hallmarks of his character.
As growing up in the UK Jamaat, one thing I vividly remember, and I'm sure many other people remember this as well, is that Wajuz used to, actively engage in charity walks and the charity challenges, the various events that the Jamaat holds. And we actually had the opportunity to speak to your sister, and she actually mentioned the intention behind this, which actually, reflects his great character. And she mentioned this, which we can also play for you here as well.
Everyone knew my father loved doing the marathon walk, and mashallah, he did it until he was 81, and this the year before he passed away. And as a child, as his daughter, I used to get worried, because after the marathon walk, my father would be so tired, and it'd take him days to recover from doing the marathon walk, and I would implore to him, don't do it this year. But he, I think, let me into his secret why he did it. And he said in life, and to get close to Allah, you have to strive through many things. And for him, each extra mile he walked, and even if he endured pain, he achieved it. And he felt if he could endure that kind of pain and achieve his goal in this world, then there's nothing to stop him achieving his ultimate goal of being close to Allah. And when he told me that, of course, I could appreciate that there was more to the marathon walk than walking 26 miles for my father.
From the many activities my father busied himself in his life, unfortunately for myself, marathon walk was not one thing I took up, so I can't remember doing one marathon walk during his lifetime, but there were many other activities, especially sporting activities, which we did share in common.
When we study the life of your father, and also throughout the series when we conducted the research on the individuals that we've done a program on, one thing we find notable in all of them is their strong relationship with Allah the Almighty. If I could ask you if you could just shed some light into his relationship with Allah the Almighty.
Apart from telling you how punctual, steadfastness he was in his namaz, to maintain that relationship with Allah, one story does come back to me, I recollect, is, as I said earlier, we shared the interest and love for football, okay? And I remember living in Glasgow at the time. I went to a football match to see Scotland play at Hampden Park, the National Stadium, along with my mates, okay? I was just a young teenager at the time. My father also went along. He went himself, okay? But I'm not too sure whether I should admit to this. It's not very becoming of a Tarbiyat secretary, but anyway, I'm ready to take whatever consequences come my way. Obviously, me and my friends tried to get into the stadium without paying for it, okay? Normally, you've got to pay for it. I like to think I've learned my lesson. I should really qualify by saying that. But it took me up to about 45 minutes, half time, to actually get into the stadium, okay, without paying for it. I should shamelessly say, okay, now. But my father, when I met him that same evening, I asked him, did you get in? Because it was so busy in that game, okay? The queues were so long. And he told me that he was approached by a police officer, because he was struggling as well, and he was approached by a police officer, and seemingly he recognised my father, and he said, good evening, Mr. Orchard. And my father never recognised him because he was in his uniform. He took off his cap and he said, oh, I remember you from yesterday. He actually met him in an interfaith meeting, okay? And he said to Mr. Orchard, please come my way. So literally he opened up the gates to the National Stadium and said, please. So seemingly someone was looking out for my father, okay? Because he had this kind of obviously special relationship, with Allah, whereas his rogue son, okay? As I said, I have learnt my lesson, I should say now, okay?
Also, which is one of the way Allah the Almighty expresses His love for His humble servants is that He speaks to them through dreams and visions. And in fact, interestingly, your father had a book. Though he was a very private man, he wouldn't announce these dreams and visions, but he would also write them. So we had the opportunity to speak to your brother, and he shared with us some of those recollections, which we can actually show for you here now.
So, like for example, in 1946 in Qadian, he says probably early 1946, I accepted Ahmadiyyat in 1945. Not so long after, I had a dream in which I saw myself meeting Hazrat Khalifatul Masih II radiallahu anhu in Masjid Mubarak, Qadian. Standing before me, he said, in order to live a successful life, you must not let sorrows affect you. And then he raised his right hand in which he held a walking stick and said that as he was about to descend some steps to leave the mosque, he repeated, and there is no doubt about it. So like, for example, that was a dream right at the beginning when he accepted Ahmadiyyat. Another dream, for example, I'll relate, is I met the promised Messiah alayhi salam. He asked me something about the condition of my faith. I replied that either before or when in Glasgow my faith was good, but afterward it had become much stronger. This I said with powerful emphasis, with a clenched hand. The promised Messiah, peace be upon him, was very pleased. He embraced me and kissed me. I awoke immediately and could feel the impressions of those kisses on my cheek bones. And then he said, I recited Alhamdulillah several times before going back to sleep again.
One day we were talking, sitting together, and I asked him, I said, Mr. Orchard, do you receive any communion from God through dreams, through visions, or direct revelation? He kept quiet for a little while and he said, Imam Sahib, I don't want to talk on this subject. But when I insisted, I said, well, why not? After all, I will gain something from it. So he said, yes, by the grace of God, I have seen many dreams, many visions, many revelations I have received that became fulfilled, every one of them. And he related a few to me, which I don't remember. One I remember, he said that in one dream, I saw that Hazrat Khalifatul Masih II radiallahu ta'ala anhu brought a cup of milk for me, and there was some pieces of bread in it. And he put this milk cup near my lips and said, Mr. Orchard, please go ahead and have it. And then he said that when I finished the drinking this milk, Huzur took the cup away and with a loud voice said, God bless you. So this was one of, there were others also, but I have now forgotten. So which shows, that he was not a missionary in the ordinary sense of the word, just walking and talking about Ahmadiyyat, but he had his connection up there with God, and I don't think there are many missionaries who have attained that position.
I actually never knew that dream book existed after he had passed away. And as you could hear from the clips, he actually wanted to keep it personal. He didn't really want to share it, okay? Because he wanted to maintain that special bond with Allah. But nevertheless, it's really heartening to hear such stories. And actually, it was quite a worrying incident at one stage. That actual book went missing, yeah? Because it was actually in my possession to begin with, and I got really worried because it's like gold dust, basically, okay? And my brother never knew where it was. No one knew where it was. And my nephew, he wanted to have a loan of it to read it himself. I said, I'm sorry, I don't know where it is. But alhamdulillah, all of a sudden, it did reappear, okay? And it's in the safe hands of my elder brother now, so it's good to know.
Nisar Sahib, you know, though the purpose of the program is to primarily focus on your father's life and the various aspects of it, but one very important factor that we cannot ignore is the tremendous role of your mother, the wife of Maulana Bashir Ahmad Sahib, especially the fact, you know, sacrifices, considering he was a missionary. We've heard about his, you know, living a life of austerity, and also he served in far-off lands. So before I ask you, you know, the pivotal role that she played and the qualities that she had, we had the opportunity to speak to one of your sisters who mentioned regarding your mother. That we can play for you now.
The second Khalifa, Hazrat Muslim Maud, may Allah be pleased with him, arranged my mother to marry my father, and they got married in Rabwa, Pakistan. After a few months, my father was posted to Trinidad in Caribbean in the Central America. For my mother, this was a new experience in different ways. She was now married to a person with a different culture from her. She was the wife of a missionary in a far-off land and away from her own family. In those days, communication was not as it is today, but her pleasant, cheerful, and patient personality helped her to overcome any difficulties she may have encountered.
To take someone out from their comfort zone and place them in a world that's alien to them is quite remarkable, and that is exactly what happened from the subcontinent to the Caribbean. And you know, she wasn't used to the people around her, the language problems, the cultural problems, but nevertheless, you know, she managed to endure it and stay steadfast. And what I do actually remember of my mother, there are many things, but one word actually comes to mind, that's obedience. I remember at her janazah, when Hazur, may Allah be his helper, he was reading out her obituary, he mentioned that my mother stayed shoulder to shoulder with my father, which was very, very much the case, and even till today they are shoulder to shoulder, because in Brookwood Cemetery they're literally lying next to each other, shoulder to shoulder. So from the beginning right to the end, you know, she was with my father, despite the difficulties of land, culture, language. You know, she was there right to the end with him.
Nisasa, moving on, we've mentioned the fact that your father, Bashir Ahmad Sahib, was a missionary of the Ahmadiyya community and a very successful one. If you could, with regards to this, you know, relate some of those qualities that he had that made him such a great missionary that he was.
I don't know how we measure success here. You mentioned success here because to me, I'm not saying he didn't, but to me, I can't remember him converting anyone, you see, okay? But maybe he did, as I said, but I can't remember him converting anyone. But I think the success is actually shown in his legacy, because from a 3-bedroom flat in the late 60s, going up till the 80s, that was known as the Mission House and our house, okay? To now we have Betul Rahman, and we have a very, very large Jamaat within Glasgow, within Scotland. When I say Scotland, he wasn't just confined to Glasgow. He had to travel to Dundee, to Aberdeen, to Edinburgh on a number of occasions just to meet his flock, to meet his individual members' flock that was scattered throughout Scotland. But as I said, it is truly his legacy, that probably lives on. And when I did go to Betul Rahman recently, there are photographs along with other Murabbiyans like Imam Bajwa Sahib and so forth. You will see him next to. As I said, it's a series, it's a legacy, and that will continue because of their commitment for the Jamaats.
It has been interesting. You mentioned that you're not aware of whether he actually did any bads or converted anyone to Ahmadiyyat. Whilst researching for this program, as I said, we had the opportunity to speak to various members of your family and friends. Bashir Rafiq Sahib, who had a very, a long interaction with your father. Interestingly, he actually mentioned that he did convert people into the fold of Ahmadiyyat, and in fact, he mentions a very interesting incident that I'd like to play for you.
I remember one thing. Once, it was the month of October, when I wrote to him as Imam and Missionary in charge that there were no bats from Glasgow in the whole year, and he should do something about it. So after about a month, he wrote back to me, and he said, Imam Sahib, I promise that before the end of the year, I will give you 3 Scottish Ahmadi Muslims. So I was surprised, how can a person say that he will bring 3 people into the fold of Ahmadiyya? But I kept quiet. In the beginning of November, he sent 1 bayat and he said, this is the first of the 3. Then the second, and on the 29th of December, he sent the 3rd bayat. And he said, I have fulfilled my pledge. These are the 3 bayats. And at the end of his letter, he said, please note that there is no effort on my side to convert these people to Ahmadiyyat or Islam. They came themselves to the mission house, and we started talking, and then they became Ahmadis. So he said that it is specially God sent. Then after a few days, he came to London. I asked him a question. I said, Archid Sahib, how can you say that before the end of the year, you will have 3 bayats? I cannot say this. Nobody can say this. He kept quiet for a little while. He was very shy in talking about these things. And then he said, when I received your letter, I was very much perturbed. I was very sad. And I thought, well, I should have done something. So I prayed vehemently to God. And I said, my God, I have tried my best. They don't accept it. So what can I do? Then he said that God, through his revelation, told me that don't worry, before the end of the year, I'll give you 3 Ahmadis, Scottish Ahmadis. And he said, when I received this revelation, I wrote to you, and that I will. And he said that one by one they came. It was not through any tabligh. Everyone said, I was passing through the street and I saw the board Ahmadiyya Muslim Mission. I got attracted and I thought, let's see who these people are. So he said, without my effort of any sort, God sent these 3 because he had revealed to me. So this shows, his piety. This shows his contact with God.
So Nizar Sahib, on the account of that, he actually did.
Well, there you go. You keep learning about my father,
Absolutely. Nizar Sahib, moving on, we were speaking about success. But one thing that I've learned, while sitting here and interviewing various guests, is that this success, is all down to their long prayers, strong relationship with Allah the Almighty, hard work, and the attachment to Khilafat Ahmadiyya. And we as Ahmadis are blessed with the institution of Khilafat Ahmadiyya. If I could ask you, if you could just shed some light on this aspect of his character, his strong attachment and relationship with Khilafat Ahmadiyya.
I'm not going to say too much on this, simply because what I do want to say on it, I hope will be profound enough, yeah? Because I've already mentioned it earlier on, that at the age of 25 years old, when he visited Qadian for the first time, one of the first members he met was Khalifa Thani Raziyallahu Anhu. And first impressions left a lasting impression, you know. And after the war, I must say, because of that meeting, he came back to Qadian and he gave his life, okay? I think that kind of sums up the effect that Khilafat had on him then, and it's been a pivotal role in his life, you know, since his last days, you know. He did have a very, very close relationship, had many, many meetings, many photographs, as many of us do have, you know. But I always recall that story, okay, and I always like relating it to many people. It was that visit, that first impression, left a lasting impression. And that's basically why, again, we are here today, and that's why you're asking me such a question.
Absolutely. Jazakallah, Nisar Sahab. Nisar, we're fast approaching towards the end of the program. But I would like to ask you, you know, as a son, you know, you had the opportunity to see your father very closely. If you could just, you know, share with us any, you know, precious memories that you have with him. No doubt all of them were precious, but any special memory that you have that is, you know, faith inspiring for the viewers at home.
You know, probably like any other son, while our father was with us, we took him for granted, you see, yeah. And as I said, I shared many sporting interests with him, especially football. And he used to take me to all the big football matches, and we used to play football in the park as well. So as I said, that's one thing, you know, I have a very close attachment to. Again, my love for football today, you know, is because of him, you know. And it's a healthy thing as well, you know, playing sport is a healthy thing, so I acquired that from him. But I must say, after his passing away, you know, I value him even more now, because my current positions within the Jamaat as a Sadr and as Tarbiyat Secretary UK, I have to say, again, I'm going to admit to something as well, that he makes my life and my work and my tasks much easier, because a lot of material that I promote from a Tarbiyat point of view to members throughout the UK are actually based on his work. I do refer to his book Life Supreme a lot. To Guideposts is another book, and many, many other small articles he has written. So basically that's what I probably never remembered that during my lifetime, but now in hindsight's such a great thing, you know. I probably value my father even more now, and I took him for granted while he was alive. This probably, as I said, is a normal case with every father-son relationship, but as I said, you know, alhamdulillah, he actually makes my life much, much easier for me these days.
Jazakallah. You know, your brothers and sisters, they had a number of interesting incidents to relate, but because of the constraint of time, we'll only suffice with one particular, you know, memory that your brother has of his father, which we can play.
Once my father was given a gift, and this is a gift here. It was a walking stick, and this belonged to Maulana Raji Kisab Anhu, and it was given to my father, and the year before he passed away, my father gave it to me as a present. So I'm quite honored to be given this as a present for my father, you know, and belonging to Maulana Raji Kisab. So hopefully I'll be able to use it.
Such gifts that my brother are talking about, I believe you call it the barak in some kind of way, yeah? And maybe I'm not so much into it, I'm just more interested in the memories I have of my father. But again, there was the walking stick and probably one or two other items my father collected on the way, okay? And I remember that in one of his trunks there was a vest, a garment, and I actually thought it was just his own, or I thought it was just a rag of some sort, but later on it transpired to have been given to him by, I think, one of the Khulafa, yeah? And to this day I don't know where I've placed it, but I think my brother, who would like to have had it, yeah, keeps asking me, reminding me, remember, where did I put it, you see. But as I said, you know, he did collect these such tabarak items, you know. We just do have one or two items which my big brother actually showed to you just now.
Yeah. Mr. Sahib, your father no doubt lived a tremendous life, and achieved a lot. But unfortunately, we're coming towards the end of the program. But one question that I would like to ask you, and that's about, when you heard about his demise. If you could just, shed some light on that, what you recall of that time and the atmosphere, when everyone, the Jamaat, particularly Jamaat UK, heard about his demise.
I remember when I heard of it, I was numb because it was actually the very first death I'd actually experienced in my family, very, very first death. I never knew what death was in my family. And so I was numb, and I remember the janazah took place in the Fazl Mosque in the Mahmood Hall. And when it was time to take the body from Mahmood Hall and place it in front of the Fazl Mosque, the nearest and dearest members of the family would come and pick up the coffin, but I think I barely just touched it, and then everyone wanted to, hold it, and it was just taken away in a wave of hands and arms, and literally I thought then that, I said I should be doing this, but then I thought that we aren't only his family, but all the other members are his family, okay? That's why he gave his life, So when I saw this happening, I was fairly comfortable about it, not thinking that I've missed out and carrying my father's coffin. But it is, they also belong to, own my father in a way to a bit, so they also had a part to play, because that was also his family as well.
It's interesting you mentioned this fact that, at his, funeral proceeding, so many people had come to attend, and it's only at, times like this that you realize how many, friends and family he actually had, how many people he meant to. Your sister actually mentioned this fact, which we can actually play for you here as well.
When my father passed away, of course, it was a time of shock and a time of great sadness. After my father passed away, that is only when I realised how many friends he had. My father was, at that time, a well-known member of our community, but there's one thing to be well-known and one thing to have a lot of friends. The thing that surprised me the most was a lot of people who are my age or my siblings' ages, they came to me and said, they expressed their sorrow at the death of my father. But the other thing they said, that they would say to me, no, you don't understand. He wasn't just a respected member of our community, he was our friend. He helped us through so many issues, through many personal issues that we had. He never judged us when we spoke to him. What he did do was give a kind word, a good piece of advice, and pray for us.
My last recollection of Bashir Orchard Sahib was just 2 days before he passed away, actually. It was a Friday, as I recall it, and after Jummah we met briefly and chatted a little bit as we used to. And just before he left, he suddenly stopped in his tracks and, turned around and started, looking for something in his pocket. He was fumbling around in his pocket, and he pulled out a 50p coin. And he told me, he said, I don't remember how much a tin of cat food costs anymore, but would you please buy a tin of cat food and call all the cats over, because by that time I had to add that when Orchard Sahib had been transferred out of Islamabad, I took over and I started feeding his cats, so they ended up on my doorstep, you see. So he used to come and visit them as well. But on that particular occasion, he said, call all the cats and give them the food and tell them that this is from Bashir Ahmad Orchard. So I said, I'll do that. So I went to the shops, got a tin of food, and when I got home that day, I called all the cats over and actually told them verbally exactly what he said. I said, this is a gift from Bashir Orchard Sahib. And they were just happily eating it. And then 2 days later, I received the very sad news that he had passed away. So it was a very sad moment, and it was a great loss to the people of Islamabad, because we'd had him here for so many years. May Allah grant him eternal rest in the nearness of his loved ones in paradise. Ameen.
Usually, to sum up Bashir Ahmad Orchard, my father, you know, he didn't live a complex life. It was a simple life. And I understand why he accepted Ahmadiyyat, why a young Englishman at the age of 25, 26, he gave his life to the Jamaat. And that was simply to become a better, virtuous, righteous person. Only Allah will know whether he has actually attained that status. And this is something that he has continued during his life to do, and still continues to do so through his books and his writings, in order to uphold and maintain Hazur's, may Allah be his helper, his constant message in terms of we should always strive to raise our levels at every opportunity.
Absolutely. Jazakallah. Wajud Sahib, unfortunately that's all the time that we have in today's program. I would like to thank you, and also the members of your family and friends who related some interesting incidents and various aspects of his life that no doubt are a source of inspiration and motivation for all of us. But for Jazakallah, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Join us in the next program of Servants of Allah, when we will be looking at the life of another dedicated servant of Ahmadiyyat. Until then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.